Megan Andersen, welcome to About Progress.
Thanks, Monica.
I've really loved being able to learn from you online about nutrition and in ways that really line up with my own values as well as my own experience and history. But, I still can come to this point in the holidays, and I'm sure many women feel this way, where even though this time of year can be so fun, there's a lot of pressure, and eating is just one of those pressures. So I wanted to start with the holdups that women face as they are entering the holiday season and why it's a pressure. It almost seems like our walls go down. So even if we've done a lot of work in trying to be better about paying attention to our body and its needs and not being swept up in diet culture, when we have so much on our plate, it's like some of those ideals and the skill sets we've learned go out the window. And
Yeah.
suddenly we're back to, like, maybe where we were in the past, where we're just overanalyzing food. We're getting anxious about the parties coming up. We're not sure how to handle them. We're not feeling confident. Anything else you can think of?
I mean, yeah, like if we're living in a perfect world where we're in control of all the variables and we're able to plan our meals and plan what time they're going to happen, nutrition and wellness is a no-brainer. But none of us really even have a single day that looks like that. So this is where flexibility within structure of taking care of ourselves comes comes into play. And it's every day. It's a daily effort to make sure that we're still taking care of ourselves as we're juggling all the things. And then of course the holidays just
Mm.
adds that extra measure to it.
So have you ever felt like the holidays made you more anxious in the past? And I'm not just talking about the to-dos, I'm talking about with eating and the parties that were coming up or, like, the food that was coming into the house and just feeling more anxious about it?
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking about this as I was preparing for us to chat and putting myself in my shoes where I was probably a decade ago, maybe 5 years ago, when all those neighborhood gifts get dropped off on the doorstep and it feels like they all come at once in a way. And it's this overwhelming flood of the foods that you don't usually have in your home. Don't tell my neighbors. Sometimes I would just throw them away because it was too much, right? It was overwhelming. And I didn't know how to control the fear that I was feeling around having that much food in our home that we didn't normally have access to. And out of
Mm,
fear, I would say I started throwing it away. And things look different now. It's not this free for all where um we all just help ourselves as soon as the snacks drop on the doorstep. But we have some
mm.
more, like I said before, there's some more flexibility within the structure of meals, snacks, treats in our home. But absolutely, I'd be lying if I said that it never caused anxiety for me before to have all the extra celebrating and food that comes with the holiday. And I think I'd also be lying if I said it doesn't cause any now. Even as a nutritional
Mm.
professional, after the years and years of work that I've done, um, it's still it's still something that I have to think about. I have to be intentional about, and it doesn't come really naturally.
And when you say you have to think about it, you have to be intentional about it, are you speaking more about you have to be mindful of where your thoughts are going and maybe where you're drifting into anxiety? Or are you talking about the way many of us might have done this in the past, where we're trying to be careful and intentional, meaning like restrictive in a way that can just, be also based in anxiety?
Yeah, probably more of the first, but because I've done so much work on the second. So
Okay.
it's more like I have to put thought and effort into the meals and snacks that we're planning outside of the celebrating and outside of the gift. If I'm going to be able to have the freedom to eat all those wonderful celebratory foods that come, then I have to have like that baseline structure of nourishing meals and snacks along the way. Because that freedom of eating those celebratory foods kind of loses its joy when that's the only food that's really around that's accessible. So if we're not having breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, and there's just a counter full of all the goodies, and that's what we're filling up on, it doesn't take too long before those foods are not satisfying and they just lose their joy.
So I want to get more into the how that you do this. I like the idea of a structure with flexibility and having a
Yes.
peace of mind of this confidence and knowing how you are going to nourish yourself in ways that are a little bit more stable, in ways that also feel good for your body, but also making space for being able to have a desire to eat something and eat it because you feel like it and it looks good and it's something that you love to eat every year. But let's back up just a little bit because you're a nutrition coach that specializes in intuitive eating. And a lot of people equate that to a phrase I heard you say, free for all. And you actually said differently, like it's not just a free for all. So tell me a little bit more about what your philosophy looks like in terms of intuitive eating in general, but also uh, painting the picture of what that looks like, especially around the holidays.
So my general philosophy, there's no one food, there's no one meal or snack that's going to make or break your wellness. And the way that I approach food is, like I said before, it's flexibility within structure. If we're going to have this freedom with food that I help women to achieve, there has to be options. There has to be options. There has to be access to meals and snacks that not only taste good to you, that are appealing to your senses, but that also feel good when you eat them. They feel nourishing. And if I were to entertain this idea of free for all, which I hear it all the time with intuitive eating, I often
Yeah.
hear, well, if I were to eat what I felt like eating, if I were to have freedom with food, then I would eat donuts all day because those taste
Mm,
amazing to me, and that's what I want to eat. Um,
yeah.
but really, if we're going to achieve the true satisfaction and nourishment out of our
Mm,
food, we have to have access to foods that are satisfying and nutritious and nourishing. So it does require some planning. And this is where a lot of people will look at diets as really appealing, almost like a peaceful way to nourish yourself because we're coming from a place of chaos. The eating has become really chaotic for us. And so
mm,
a diet looks like, hey, I'll actually be taking better care of myself as I plan nourishing meals, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks. And the problem that we sometimes get into is we get stuck on the specific food that a diet plan has offered or that a diet plan
mm,
says is okay or not okay. But
mm,
intuitive eating looks at taking care of yourself in a similar way, but without the restriction of specific foods that are good or bad. It's still
mm, mm.
planning breakfast and lunch and dinner and snacks. And it's still taking care of yourself in the beautiful way that feels so nourishing, but it's just not so rigid. There's not specific times where that meal has to happen and when it has to end.
Everything you've said makes it seem more doable and less scary. Including the fact
Good.
that you, even as a nutrition professional, are not immune to the anxieties we all can kinda carry coming into it, but that also doesn't mean you're doing it wrong, and it doesn't mean that you can't do it in a way that feels good, and it also doesn't mean that you can't pivot as needed, like, when you notice that you are in a free-for-all state but you're also not enjoying it and it's not feeling good, you're not
Mhm.
tasting it, so you can pivot back to a little bit of safety and some structure and then get back to that flexibility too. Can you tell us more on what that looks like? Flexibility within structure. That's not something I have lived out with an intuitive eating as I've worked on this for a long time, but I didn't ever put that into words on what that actually looks like. It's not like for every meal I'm trying to start over and say, well, what do I want to eat right now? I do still have that structure in mind. I never really realized I was doing that. So tell us a little bit more about that whole idea.
So, if we were to look at a hierarchy of our nutritional needs, or even just our needs with food, if it was a triangle, the very bottom of the triangle is just getting enough to eat. And then it works up from there to eventually getting at the top where it's functional food. And sometimes a lot of us try to go straight to the top where we're trying to eat the right foods and the right quantity of
Mhm.
foods for our specific needs, whether we have a health diagnosis or something else. But we forget that very base at the bottom is making sure that we're eating enough. And
Mm.
it's really easy to get out of touch of what enough even feels like, especially in our society where there's just so many paradoxical views on how to eat and what's healthy and what isn't. So it's really easy to get out of touch. But if you can just start with a general rule that every 2 to 4 hours, you should be eating something. I just used the should word. But if you are to be eating enough food, every 2 to 4 hours is the right amount of time. Now, does it mean that that's a meal every 2 to 4 hours? What does that look like? Let's just do an example. So it's a school day. My kids go off to school. We leave the house by 8. Breakfast is around 7:30. My kindergartner, he's 5, like just barely. He needs a snack before lunch. So he has breakfast at 7:30. He's got a snack again around 10, and then lunch is at noon. And do you see how that's like every 2 to 4 hours? And then
Mhm.
I actually need to pack him a snack between lunch and when he comes home from school. So he's eating again around 2, and then he's still coming home starving, and he's eaten all of those things. Now, we aren't 5-year-old kindergartners, but there's something to be said about the way that a child acknowledges hunger and the way that they feed themselves. And it's so much more fluid and natural, and there's no all or nothing. They eat when they're hungry, they stop when they're full. And there's something that happens as we grow up where we kind of lose that. And I think it's because of the voices that we've heard around us, not snacking in between meals, maybe, or that there's certain times when it's okay to eat and when it's not okay to eat. But I watched that little boy come home from school, and he's usually really cranky, right? Like it's been a long day. He's been working really hard. He's tired and he's hungry. And so before we really do anything else, we feed the 5-year-old. And then he becomes his happy self again. But how often as women do we forget that? We're just going, 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 taking care of everyone else's needs. Motherhood is such a beautiful practice of serving and giving of yourself. Sometimes we give to the point where there's nothing else left to give. And I see it all the time with the way that we feed and nourish ourselves. We're actually just not getting enough to eat to be able to continue to give at our best.
You know what is fascinating, Megan, is when I first heard you talk about flexibility within structure, I went right to, well, what you're allowed to eat. And you flipped this for me a lot. So when we're thinking about structure as someone who is also wanting to be an intuitive eater, we're starting with that baseline or the base of the pyramid, like you said, of making sure we're eating enough, period.
Mhm.
We're not going to rules. We're not going, although, some of that functional side can come into play, as I know, as someone who helps people who have specific health needs that demand that they maybe eat differently because of diabetes or cholesterol issues or other things that are at play. Um, but anyway, I just love that to me is a structure I wouldn't have realized as a structure. As I head into the
Yes.
holidays, am I making sure I am eating enough?
Mhm.
And that's the structure.
As we're going throughout our day, if we aren't eating enough, then that's when, at the end of the day, typically is when those celebrations start, right? Or when the things are getting dropped off on your doorstep. So I think a lot of times where the anxiety and the stress comes with all those celebratory foods is that we haven't been eating enough leading up
Mm.
to the foods. And then we feel fear and we feel out of control when those foods are presented to us because we just haven't eaten enough leading up to that.
to me, that's where that structure is, and just having that peace of mind that I have fed myself, I've nourished myself today, and I'm not
Mhm.
entering this with this gnawing hunger. I have taken care of myself, and now I can eat with joy and really pay attention to my taste buds and what I'm actually liking and what I'm not, and be
Yeah.
able to better have the control therein. I was going to ask if there are any other pieces of that structure, piece of the puzzle that they can be aware of as they head into the holidays in particular.
I mean, as you were saying, as you were just talking about the way it can feel as you do nourish yourself, eating enough, taking really good care of yourself, and then enjoying those celebratory snacks, it reminded me to make sure that you are in a mindset of just exactly what you described. You're nourishing yourself and you are taking the best care of yourself. And that's your motivation. The motivation isn't, I'm going
Mm.
to feed myself really well and eat really good so that I don't feel bad about eating the celebratory food.
And also, I feel like we moralize ourselves, right? So I'm good. I've been bad today
Mhm.
because I ate this.
Mhm.
I mean, that's a lot of what we talk about over here
Mhm.
at the parties or the neighborhood events or the family gatherings. Oh, I've been so bad today. I ate this. I ate
Yep.
that.
Or I've
Mm,
been really good today. I've done really good today, so I have earned this. I mean, it will look the same from the outside, possibly, as you are feeding yourself nourishing meals throughout the day, and then you're going to the party and enjoying the celebratory foods. From the outside, it looks the same. But what I'm more concerned about is your intention on the inside, because the negative self talk and the negative talk around food starts with what we're thinking and where our intentions lie
mhm.
as we approach that food. So
Okay.
if we're moralizing what we're eating all throughout the day, there's actually a lot of physiological things that will do to kill your joy, but also
Yeah.
that will actually affect your health when the mind game with the food is so strong that you're not able to enjoy it. And it will actually cause physiological changes in the way you metabolize that food. But if you can approach this self care just the way that you described, where you're just caring for yourself and you are enjoying your food and getting joy out of it, stay in that mindset. That's the mindset I want you to be in.
Okay. So with this structure, I'm just going to recap a little bit. The
Yeah.
structure is to have one of the primary focuses being, am I eating enough?
Yeah.
And making sure you're doing that. The second part of the structure is mindset. It's having a mindset of the goal of eating to be about nourishment, care, and joy. I want to hear if you have any more things to add here, but first, can I just say something? I have
Yeah.
told I've had this theory for years. I've had this theory that the times in my life that I am most anxious about food and I'm moralizing it the most have been the times where my body has not been at its healthiest. And even though, like, I'm eating the same foods as when I'm just doing what you said and having the same mindset of nourishment, care, and joy, and I can be eating the same things, but my body is different, like, physiologically, and you just said something about that. I mean, can you tell us a little bit more? Because maybe this isn't just my theory, maybe this is actual science? Like, the way we approach food can shift the way we metabolize it? Is that what you just said?
That's just exactly what I just said. So
I'm about to
we're
call
just
all my sisters who I have told this to
talking.
for years.
Yeah,
Tell
no,
us
you're
more.
right, Monica. And this is where intuitive eating fits right into science of how we metabolize food. So when you are feeling anxious about food, or maybe you're in a particular season of life where your body's working on healing, and I mean, I'm thinking postpartum, or maybe during pregnancy or an injury, there are hormones at play that are trying to work to heal your body, to take care of you. The human body is set up to survive. And it's a beautiful, innate gift that we've all been given to survive, and our body heals itself. The thing is, when we are at a state of pain or recovery, the hormone cortisol is elevated. And when cortisol is elevated, it actually suppresses the ability to digest your food. It suppresses the ability for insulin to take sugar from your blood and put it into your cells to use as energy. It makes your liver produce more LDL cholesterol when you're in that state of stress. And it's the
Wow.
state of fight or flight is it's a gift, right? When we need to run away from something really fast, when we need to fight the bear, when we need to catch our kid as they're falling off of the chair, right? It's a gift. But
Mm.
when we're living our life in too much stress, in too much fight or flight, that cortisol, that gift, actually turns into a bit of a curse, and it's stopping us from metabolizing our food and using what we're eating to fully take care of our body. Does that
Fascinating.
make sense?
Okay. I yes, it does. And it actually is like, wow, we should do a whole episode on this at a later date. And I know you teach this in a class too, a full like hour-long class for people. But thank you
Yes.
for sharing that nutshell with us so that we can better understand like this isn't just about how you feel. It's about how things are literally metabolized in your body and that the way you view food is impacting that. Amazing to hear
Wow.
about that.
You wouldn't think that having specific food rules or labeling food as good versus bad would really cause a physiological reaction in your body. But if you're labeling your food as bad and you eat that food, what does that make you? And what does that do to your peace? It probably
Mhm.
raises your stress again. And when your stress is raised, your cortisol is raised, and you're not able to fully metabolize your food the way your body is intended to.
'Kay, this is just so fun. It's so fun
Yes.
to learn more about how this all works, you know?
Yep.
Is there any other tips that you would suggest for women who want to enter the Christmas season with more joy and
Yes.
confidence and peace and fun around food?
Yeah. And actually, Monica, this goes really well with what you've been sharing with your audience as far as Christmas and gifting and putting yourself on the list. How easy is it in the rush of the morning to make sure you've got lunches packed for your kids and that you've given them a really well rounded meal to send them out the door, right? It's what we do, it's innate. How easy is it to do that for yourself as well? Are you on the list? Are you
Hmm,
setting a plate for yourself at breakfast? Are you at least taking it in the car with you as you're taking them? The feeling that you will have is so different when you're making sure that you are going right along through your day as you're taking care of your kids, that you're taking care of yourself as well.
hmm. So just that element of care. Can I care for myself alongside the other people I am caring for?
Yeah. Yeah. I have 5 kids. And in the mornings, I have found myself falling into this habit of getting out 5 plates so that I can serve up their breakfast. And then it's like,
Mm,
I'll eat when I get home. But you know what happens when you get home? It's like, oh, there's this and this and this and this. And before you know it, it's 11 o'clock and I have nourished myself 0 and things are starting to unravel because I just don't have energy. So I've started getting out 6 plates and making sure that I am including my own self care as I'm caring for all the people around me.
and I just think that's such an excellent thing to model to your kids too. That's literally showing them mom has needs too, and I do my best to take care of them and include them as I'm taking care of your needs too. And I even do this when I'm eating something in my like I finally sit down at the dinner table and a child says, "Can you get me water?" And I just barely lifted a fork to my mouth, you know, and they're all halfway through their meal. I'll say, you know, I'm starting to eat now, but you can go get your water. You can take your cup over and get the water, or we have the pitcher at the table. You can ask so and so to pass it. You know, just having that moment to model the care for yourself. Any other tips for them?
Yes. So the way that I've been presenting this is a lot of nourishing yourself throughout the day leading up to when you'll have celebratory foods later. I kind of want to rewind that a little bit and say, look, there's no specific time of day when you can have the foods that the
Yeah.
neighbors have dropped off or the leftover stuff from the party last night. Um, so maybe the cake that you got looks really great and you're wanting to eat that. If you can get in the mindset of it's absolutely available now and it's absolutely available later,
Mhm.
but also,
Yeah.
what can I add? So instead of, no, I can't have that right now because I haven't eaten lunch yet, or I can't have the cookies yet because it's not time. You know what? Those cookies look really good. What could I add to that to round it out? Maybe I could add a glass of milk. Maybe I could add some cut up oranges or an apple to round it out and to make sure that you're still really nourishing yourself.
Never would have thought of that. I just wow. Yes, I can do that. I can eat a banana alongside my cookie or something like that. Just add to it a bit.
Yes, because what happens when you do say, "No, I can't have those cookies right now because it's not time or because I haven't had
Mhm.
breakfast yet." No. Well, what often happens is this helicopter eating, right? So, I
Okay.
can't have the cookies, so I'm gonna have a slice of cheese and some grapes. But that wasn't quite satisfying, so I'm gonna have a piece of whole wheat toast with some peanut butter, and that wasn't quite satisfying. So I think I'm going to go for a smoothie. And then before you know it, you've had all those things and then you enjoyed the cookie. And if you would have just enjoyed the cookies and added to it, what can I add to that food that's sounding really delicious to me instead of I can't have that and you're helicoptering around, you will find that you're more satisfied and you're able to just move on and not fixate on that food that you've been restricting.
Yeah, that makes so much sense to me. And that also goes back to that satisfaction piece that you brought in, having the mindset that food should be nourishing and an act of self-care and joy. Also, like it should taste good. It should be satisfying. And and that's okay if it's not 7 p.m.
Yeah.
It's 2:03 and you can have that. That's really freeing to me because that's one of the rules I still
Good.
kinda carry around internally is doing that same thing. So, Megan, we've covered some great tips for them. I've learned some new things that I'm really happy to have learned about. I have a final question for you, but before I do that, I have a one I wanna slip in, and that's what food are you looking forward to having this holiday season? Like, is there, like, this particular meal or dish or baked good that you always look forward to as you approach, Christmas?
My answer might surprise you. We have pumpkin spice things all year round,
Oh,
and
yeah?
we actually, like, we have pretzel jello several times a year. If you're not from Utah, maybe you don't know what that is, but, um, I hope that doesn't kill the joy of your listeners, but, a lot of these celebratory foods that we have at Christmas time, we actually eat year round. So, I'll just preface it by saying
I love
that.
it.
Yeah. It just puts a whole different view almost. It removes the all or nothing, like, feast or famine
Sure.
feeling of the holidays when you know that you can actually have pumpkin pie in July if you want. Um,
Yeah.
but we do I wanna answer your question. So there are some traditional foods that we do have at Christmas, even though we have them throughout the year as well. But we've gotten really into Mexican food for Christmas dinner. So I make
Oh, I love
enchiladas.
that.
Yeah, I make enchiladas and I freeze the peaches off of my trees. And so I make a really yummy peach salsa. It's kind of like a pico that goes with our enchiladas. And
Ooh.
I always make horchata to go with it. So that's something that we look forward to every Christmas day. That's our Christmas meal tradition.
Oh, I adore hearing that. And for me, I feel like so much of the joy of the holidays are certain foods I attach to it, like making homemade caramels, which I normally don't take the time to make, but like watching a Christmas movie and making caramels just feels like Christmas? Or having those cinnamon rolls Christmas morning after we've opened our gifts or before we've opened our gifts because everyone's starving. Um, those to me are things I
You know
just look
what?
forward to so
That's
much.
that's the one that I probably missed. I probably only make cinnamon rolls twice a year, and Christmas is one of them. Just because it's so involved.
Yeah, it is a lot of work. Yeah, yeah, I hear you on that. Okay, so now let's get to our final question, and it's what is one small way listeners can take action on what they learned from you today?
I want you to get another plate out of the cupboard. When you're feeding your kids, I want you to set a place for yourself. I feel like it's easy to do at dinner time, but can you try to do it for all the meals of the day and all the snacks? Get
Mm.
another plate out for yourself, or if you eat your sandwiches off of a napkin like I do, so I can save a dish, that's fine too. But set yourself as a place and continue to nourish yourself just as you would your kids.
That's a great challenge, and not just for everyone listening, for me too. I'm realizing just, I'm like, I gotta get them to school. I'll eat when I'm back, or I'll eat when I'm doing this later. But nope, that's a really good way for me to make some small shifts in my life. So thank you for sharing that. I would like to direct
Right.
people to anything that you would like them to know about, where they should go. What would you say?
Yeah. Well, I'm most active on Instagram, so follow me there. It's Megan Andersen nutrition. Anderson is with an E. And I don't know when this will air, but I do have master classes. So just watch my Instagram. And that is my favorite format to show up to teach. It's really hard
Okay,
to teach nutritional concepts in reels and even 10-minute live Q&A, but the longer format of 60 minutes is just my favorite. So watch for those on my Instagram.
cool. I'll make sure they look out for those and follow you on Instagram. We'll link that all in the show notes. And I will add, though, that your reels, even your shorter content, is really valuable and really helpful. And I've enjoyed watching your live replays too, where you take on a different theme and really dig deep into it with people's questions. Thank you for all you're doing, Megan, and for taking the time to be on the show.
Well, thank you so much for asking me too. This was really fun.
Okay, I'll press stop here. That was awesome. So can Megan, I would just hit a quick pause here. Were there any other tips that we have not hit on for you?
Oh, yes, there is one
Okay,
more.
so I'll direct us back to that. Okay.
Okay.
Any other tips, Megan, that you ha so sorry, say that one more time again.